I welcome you all to the 2021 edition of TERI's annual flagship event, the World Sustainable Development Summit, under the broad theme, Redefining Our Common Future, Safe and Secure Environment for All. This edition of the WSTS marks the 20 years of the platform, and it is a matter of great pride for all of us at TERI to have you all join us for this important milestone. Your support is instrumental in the success. With this, I'm delighted to welcome you all to our thematic track titled Urban Resilience, Participative Governance, Design and Development. To give a background and to set the context, cities, particularly in the Global South, represent socially, politically, and environmentally complex spaces steeped in systemic inequities. These are also spaces that witness growth most, but in an informal and unmanaged way. Rapid urban development have created socioeconomic vulnerabilities, which are further exacerbated due to the effects of stresses stemming from climate change. And building resilience to climate change here is challenging to start with. However, since urban systems and urban centers are critical to the investment, development, and governance in a country, resilience to climate change is now a paramount agenda. Through this thematic track, we attempt to look at the roles subnational and non-state actors have in building urban resilience to climate change. What have been some innovative ways that cities have worked towards building resilience, the challenges that they have faced, and how have they overcome the same, etc. The track today attempts to also advance the learnings from our pre-COP webinar series held in December 2020, where we attempted to unpack and strengthen the dialogue on adaptation and resilience from the context of India's development prerogative, resource constraints, opportunities and gaps. Learning from both the webinar will feed into the 6th Adaptation Futures Conference being co-hosted by TERI and the World Adaptation Science Program in October 2021. The event today will start with an opening session by Mr. Ken O'Flaherty, followed by a moderated panel. With this, I would like to welcome Mr. Ken O'Flaherty, who is presently the Regional COP26 Ambassador for Asia Pacific and South Asia from the Government of UK. He has recently returned from a posting as a minister in Rome and has experience in a number of foreign office departments. He has previously served in the British Embassy in Tokyo and Paris as well as a former UK representation to the European Union. He has worked on a wide range of issues from climate change and energy to economic, EU cooperation, security, counterterrorism, and migration issues. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Swati, and I'm delighted to be here with you today to celebrate the 20-year journey of the World Sustainable Development Summit and to discuss a very important theme for us as COP26 presidency, adaptation and resilience, and particularly in an urban context. At the outset, I'd very much like to thank our partners, TERI, in organising this forum, and the Government of India for their continued support and leadership on this really important agenda. Climate change is no longer a distant future. It is here. It is happening now in varying degrees across the world. Changing rainfall patterns, temperature extremes, increase in frequency and the intensity of extreme climatic events are worsening the vulnerabilities faced by the marginalised. It's no longer unusual to hear regular news on heat waves, on droughts, cyclones, flooding and the concurrent damage that's inflicted on lives, livelihoods, biodiversity, the economy, social bonds and networks. Unfortunately, this last year, India has witnessed firsthand the compounded impact due to the interaction of multiple risks. The country has faced climatic events such as Cyclone Amphan, Cyclone Nisarga and flooding, while still reeling from the really severe social, economic and infrastructural challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's unfortunate to see that the economy has, like other economies worldwide, been severely impacted and is predicted to shrink further, directly pushing millions to poverty without any reliable livelihood source. So this underscores the need to focus on resilient development and transformative adaptation for a green and inclusive recovery. Just this weekend, I was very sad to see the devastating images of a deluge of water due to a glacial burst washing away a dam in Uttarakhand. My thoughts and all our thoughts and prayers are, of course, with the people of Uttarakhand who have been on more than one occasion a witness to the impacts of climate change. A tragedy like this underscores the urgent need to focus on resilient development and transformative adaptation for a green and inclusive recovery. And nowhere is that more pertinent than here in India. One place to start is, of course, to look at subnational entities, Indian cities, for example, for the challenges and the opportunities that climate change presents. India, of course, as everyone knows, has one of the highest urban populations in the world. India's urban population has increased exponentially from 26% of the population in 1990 to 32% of the population in 2014. Cities are estimated to support more than 40% of India's population and more than 75% of the national GDP by 2030. Rapid, unplanned urbanisation, compounded with climate risks such as flooding, heat waves and so forth, risk aggravating the vulnerability of cities and poor communities who live in those cities. In recent years, multiple extreme events have severely affected urban centres, including Chennai, Mumbai, Kochi and Bhubaneswar. Such disasters have long-lasting impacts on the socio-economic, physical conditions of cities and communities in terms of the impacts on on urban infrastructure, social cultural systems, and indeed the overall quality of life. According to the Government of India's high-powered expert committee, in order to maintain and accelerate economic growth, India would require approximately 640 billion US dollars of investment until 2031 in urban infrastructure and services. So given that scenario, building urban resilience is imperative for safeguarding urban investments and paving the way for a forward-looking, risk-aware, inclusive and integrated approach to sustainable urban development. India has taken commendable steps on climate action, and I'd like to take a moment to recognise and congratulate India on its climate leadership and on bringing the focus on adaptation and resilience. India has taken clear steps towards achieving its NDC targets by delineating and therefore decentralising its policy landscape into national and subnational levels through the national and state action plans on climate change. As UNCCD President at the UNFCCC COP14 on combating desertification 2 years ago, India pledged to restore 26 million hectares of land by 2030. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Architecture Infrastructure, or CDRI, at the UN Secretary-General's Climate Action Summit in New York in 2019, which we're very proud to be part of as the UK. CDRI will no doubt play a crucial role in replicating and scaling best practice in disaster resilient infrastructural development. At the recently held Global Commission on Adaptation, PM Modi called for a change in lifestyles globally as a means to adapt to the disastrous impacts of climate change. He reiterated that adaptation was a key element of India's developmental efforts. Since climate adaptation actions are central to India's development goals, this is also an area of focus for the India-UK partnership. The UK is working with India through the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Act, the country's largest social protection scheme, to improve the abilities of poor and vulnerable people to cope with climate change impacts. On urban resilience, the UK has, of course, 3 decades of development partnership with the Government of India, delivering inclusive and sustainable growth and improving living standards for people across the country. We have partnered with India to develop innovative, high-tech, world-class solutions to the challenges faced by Indian cities. This includes strengthening urban and infrastructure governance, improving the investment climate to accelerate high-quality, low-carbon and climate-resilient projects in cities and transport systems, and also supporting urban resilience for the poorest and most vulnerable through sectors such as food, water, disaster risk, preparedness reduction and adaptation to coastal erosion. We really value our partnership with India as a leader that can share valuable lessons and inspire others to act. So we're committed to working with the Government of India as a key partner on the path to a successful, ambitious COP, including on shared priorities like the energy transition, adaptation and resilience, and clean transport. Building on that progress and recognising what still needs to happen, we are working towards an ambitious international campaign on adaptation and resilience in the run-up to COP26 and beyond. That includes increasing public A&R funding, ensuring that developed countries mobilise $100 billion of climate finance by 2021, of which there should be a 50-50 split between funding for mitigation and adaptation and resilience activities. We need to shift private finance towards climate resilient investments, building on the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment launched by the UK and other countries at the UN Climate Action Summit. We must encourage and support countries to develop clear whole of government A&R plans, and through the recently launched Adaptation Action Coalition, come forward with concrete action that demonstrates a gold standard in tackling urgent climate adaptation needs. Expanding protection against climate-linked disasters through insurance and through social protection coverage and investment in early warning systems, building on initiatives like India's Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or CDRI, the Risk-Informed Early Action Partnership, or REAP, and the INSEE Resilience Global Partnership. Harnessing the power of science, technology and innovation to build a climate resilient future for everyone, especially those who are hit hardest by the impacts of climate change. We are building an adaptation research alliance that will bring together experts from around the world to level up our investment in research that will help business, people and organisations to adapt to climate change by scaling up action-focused, user-centred research that delivers practical solutions. We want to mobilise businesses, investment cities and civil society through the Race to Resilience campaign to ramp up climate action and strengthen the resilience of 4 billion people in vulnerable cities and communities by 2030. I very much encourage all those who want to play a part in supporting those most vulnerable to climate change to join those campaigns. In conclusion, bringing together different stakeholders to champion and prioritise the urban resilience agenda is crucial, as resilience action requires cross-cutting, multi-level and multi-stakeholder engagement. It also requires strong commitments and cooperation, not just amongst various city-level agencies and utilities, but also between businesses and communities. It's estimated that $94 trillion worth of infrastructure investments until 2040 will be directed towards urban centres globally. By some estimates, 70% of India's cities are yet to be built. That development needs to respond to the challenges presented by climate change to build a future that is more resilient. The UK and India are working together as a force for good, and our shared commitment to tackling climate change and environmental stress makes us natural partners, and I've been really impressed with the depth and the breadth of our association in country. That spans technical assistance programmes, direct investment, research partnerships and collaboration on international initiatives. As COP President, we will work together with our partners Italy to help bring the world together to drive momentum on climate ambition and green growth and ensure that no one is left behind. The UK is keen to hear from the public, from practitioners, grassroots representatives, researchers, policymakers, businesses and development partners through events such as that one today. We're committed as COP26 presidency to amplify your voices so your experience can inform, inspire and enable effective adaptation and resilience at scale. By working collectively, we can help the world to adapt and protect lives, livelihoods and communities from the effects of climate change. The time is now, and we look forward to working with you on this essential agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for a very comprehensive address. With those insights as reference, I will, without further delay, move on to our panel discussion. The panel is being moderated by Mr. Jagan Shah, who is a senior infrastructure advisor at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office of the British High Commission. Mr. Shah coordinates the FCDO's technical assistance for India's Department of Economic Affairs for project preparation, finance, and public-private partnership related to the National Infrastructure Pipeline and the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, an international charter-based organization co-created by India and UK. We also have an esteemed set of speakers for today's panel who are all experts in their field. Dr. Uma Maheshwaran Rajashekar, who is the chair of Urban Resilience at the National Institute of Urban Affairs. Dr. Surendra Babu, Deputy General Manager, Nabard. Mr. Devendra Dalai, Director Environment from the Department of Environment, Chandigarh. Ms. Preeti Bhandari, Director of Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management Division, ADB. Ms. Aditi Garg, CEO of the Indoor Smart City, who's just joined us. And Dr. Manish Srivastava, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Energy and Environment at Terry School of Advanced Studies. Over to you, Mr. Shah, for the panel.
Thank you, Swati. I thought you'd probably give a better introduction to each of the speakers. Would you like to do that as planned?
Sure, sir, I'll do that. I was planning to keep it short so that the speakers have more of a time, but I'll go ahead. Our first speaker, Dr. Uma Maheshwaran Rajashekar, who is the chair of Urban Resilience at the National Institute of Urban Affairs, is heading the Climate Center for Cities CQ, and he has over 17 years of experience in developing risk reduction strategies, climate change analysis, institutional strengthening for governments, INGOs, and multilateral agencies. His recent efforts have been towards bridging the technology and communication gap to enable informed decision-making. He has been a team leader and project manager for some of the pioneering risk resilience efforts in India, including implementation of early warning systems, urban disease surveillance, and city resilience strategies. His work has been published as peer-reviewed journal articles, technical reports, and has been presented at various international and national platforms. His recent work on development and implementation of urban health services monitoring system has been recognized as an intervention to watch out for by the UN Secretary General's Global Pulse Initiative. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Swati. Can I just invite Mahesh? Do you want to go ahead and make your presentation? And we'll have a discussion after all the presentations. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and hope you can see my slide. Is it visible?
Yeah, it is visible.
Yeah, Mahesh, we can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Please go into slideshow view.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, DFID and WSTS for giving me an opportunity to take you through what we do at the Climate Center for Cities. Shortly, we call it CQ. Of course, the keynote speaker did highlight the extent of investment which is happening in India. And this is quite amazing to note that most of our investments currently are also diverted towards urban areas, given that there is going to be more population which are currently residing in urban areas, which accounts to 33%. But with the 2021 census, we are expecting more than 40% of the people living and also contributing to the livelihood within urban centers. In that initiative of investing towards the cities, there's been several programs. Previously, there were JNNURM, and currently there are smart city missions. But apart from it, there are also infrastructure systems which are needed to basically enable people move around and also enable businesses to thrive in these urban centers. And for that, we are also going towards green energy projects and also PMAY, which is a Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana for getting affordable houses. While all these things are being constructed, and it's very important for us to not look at climate change or climate resilience separately as an initiative, because we have been looking at adaptation, mitigation, and climate resilience as a separate sector, even though the Ministry of Environment, Forestry, and Climate Change has done significantly to improve the climate awareness within the country. I think while we are investing this huge amount of resources towards these new and upcoming infrastructure, it is very important for us to implement all these infrastructure, keeping in mind the climate lens, or making these infrastructure climate resilient, so that they come in handy for not the next few years, but for several decades to come, at least for 5 decades, which many of these infrastructures are designed for. So with that in mind, what we want to do within the vision of the C-Cube is to strengthen capacities of urban managers through shared knowledge, good practices, tools, and training, and also fostering partnership. And that was something which the previous keynote speaker did mention about. And this is something, given the scale of India's urbanization, the number of urban local bodies which are in the country, this cannot be taken up by one ministry or one department or one institution for that matter. So it is a collective effort. And how do we create platforms for several people to come together and engage? And of course, not only implement climate actions, but also how do we align to some of these national and international frameworks, such as Sustainable Development Goal, NDC, and Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. With that in mind, the C-Cube works across 6 pillars, which is research, policy, planning, programs, and project. Primarily, we also focus on building capacities of ULBs and institutions. And we also we are also coming up with technology and data solutions, along with innovations which can help leapfrog in this particular area. Of course, we do quite a bit of matchmaking between cities and partners, but we are also trying to create a marketplace for data and knowledge products, apart from peer-to-peer learning, which we try to give a platform to. And we also try to look in terms of building capacities for regional institutions which can take up the mandate and which can also help cities in their areas to focus more on development goals. Recently, we launched the Climate City Smart Assessment Framework 2.0, which comprises of 5 key sectors and 28 indicators. And this was something which was rolled out to 126 cities across the country. When you put together all the population, it accounts to more than 100 million plus people. So we want to encourage these cities to implement climate action, not as a separate mechanism, but as part of what they do on a day-to-day basis. That includes urban planning, conserving green cover and biodiversity, looking at energy and green buildings, mobility which happens within the city, and also the air quality, apart from it, water resource management and waste management. We have come up with a unique way to approach this problem. Rather than ranking cities, we have taken the approach of, why don't we create development stage indicators that at the bottom you see that we don't name whether a city is ranked 1 in terms of climate performance or 10 in terms of climate performance. We name them as climate warriors. These are cities which are at the early stages of thought process where they want to do something about climate, but they don't know what to do. And then there are these explorers where they want to do something, and then we align them with partners, align them with institutions, align them with training and capacity building, so they get them, they are able to wrap their mind around in terms of what works for their cities and where they need to prioritize. And then comes climate trendsetters. These are the ones which have the concrete plans and strategies based on their needs and based on the availability of the resources they have at hand. And then there are climate leaders who are implementing projects, and then the climate champions who are able to show impact on the ground year on year. So this is an assessment which started in 2019, and we have done the second phase of the assessment. The indicators have been improved, and this year we have included all the 500,000 cities, 500,000 plus population cities, in addition to the 100 smart cities. And we have been able to roll it out, not as an individual institution, like I said, but collectively as a group of institutions coming together. And this includes cities, this includes research organizations, state governments, academic institutes, development banks, startups, urban labs, and so many others. So we are very thankful to some of the institutions who have already partnered with us. Currently, we have close to 50 people who have committed to working on urban climate change issues. But as we move forward, we are hoping that more people join us, and collectively we try to work towards building climate resilience in across Indian cities. Thank you.
Thanks, Mahesh.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mahesh, for setting out the engagements that NIU is doing on this sector. Swati, I guess we can move on. Sorry to burden you with this, but I'd like to now invite Dr. Surendra Babu, who is Deputy General Manager at Nabard. Dr. Babu, over to you.
So very good afternoon to everybody in India, across the world, actually. So welcome on behalf of Nabard to the WSDS 2021. Actually, though the theme for the discussion is the urban resilience and the participative governance, design and development, I would like to share Nabard experiences. Our experience has not only been exclusive to the urban areas, but to the rural and semi-urban areas also. So as we know, I think we all will agree that the climate actions are beyond boundaries. So keeping that theme in view, our experience has been to work with the actually farming communities, to the rural women, to the poor people, to the tribals. And besides that, our approach to sanction the project and implement the project and take forward the climate action has been towards the saving the energy, renewable energy, as also conserving the biodiversity. We know that any resilient interventions perhaps would not be successful if we do not take all stakeholders on board. Therefore, creating awareness actually is a big challenge so far as the climate change project is concerned for creating the resilience interventions. So when we consider it is climate resilience interventions is the key, Nabard has followed the approach following the 6 steps when we sanction the project and go for the implementation of these projects. First is the creating the awareness among the community through the consultative process. And this is basically to make them aware that these projects are going to be implemented in these areas, selected identified areas. Our second approach remains is the creating the awareness among the community through PRA exercise. So that helps us to understand actually how much is the planning process required to implement the project. Thereafter, the third step we follow is to design the actually region-specific project where the interventions are designed and the action plan and implementation plan is prepared. Thereafter, for creating the awareness planning process, we follow by creating the stakeholder workshops at district level or at the state level or at the national level. And thereafter, we assess on the realistic basis what is the financial requirement and how much would be the commitment to the financial actually a part of the project. And then we identify the specific implementing executing entity who will take forward this agenda, including the actually the which can provide the handholding as also the take up the social interventions. Now, keeping these 6 major approaches to take up the project forward, our experience actually have been very exhaustive so far as the implementing the climate change project since inception of Nabard, particularly since 2000. Our project basically to the soil and water conservation to the communities through watershed development programs and also the holistic development of the tribal communities. And that was basically to create the sustainable livelihood for the tribal communities. From there on, we have been able to become the national implementing entity to the adaptation fund, wherein we have been able to actually implement 6 effective adaptation projects, which were covering the fisheries, agriculture, security, and basically bioecosystem development and water-related interventions. And thereafter, Nabard became the direct access entity to Green Climate Fund. Simultaneously, Government of India also came out with the NAFCC fund, Ministry of Environment and Forest. So under these 2 funds, Nabard has implemented successfully 2 projects. Actually, if we see particularly if we see the example of Green Climate Fund. First project, actually, this is more focusing towards the urban resilience. It is basically the rooftop solar station project, wherein our objective was to create the green energy market in India. This is through NBFC Tata Cleantech in India. This is basically $250 million project, wherein 250 megawatt of solar energy we want to produce through in industrial houses, commercial houses, as also the residential buildings. So this is our one example, successful linkage, wherein we are going to create the linkage partly to the urban and peri-urban areas. Our another project was basically regarding the green, it is the groundwater recharge and solar micro pump system in Odisha. So that project is also underway. Basically, this is typically for the creating the food security in Odisha. Now, the most important part is Nabard has implemented 30 different type of project in India under the National Adaptation Fund on Climate Change, wherein it is not the adaptation part only we have addressed, the mitigation activities also we have addressed, and also we have been able to support, link it with the urban resilience part. For example, in West Bengal, through rooftop water harvesting system, we have been able to help the urban areas so far as the water availability is concerned. Similarly, in other northeast states, through Springside development program, we have been able to ensure the water security to the urban and semi-urban centers. And similarly, some of the projects, just like Yamuna biodiversity part in Delhi, which we call it the lung of Delhi. So on that line also, we have been able to implement actually bioecological restoration project, particularly in Rajasthan, Telangana, and Maharashtra. So this has been our experience, and there is no boundary for us to actually segregate the urban and rural resilience. However, the specific project, particularly the health project, we are looking for example, in urban centers, waste to energy management project we are looking for, and we are trying to create awareness among the stakeholders. We are also trying to develop the water security system and urban forestry part. So these are the areas we are looking for, and I summarize my discussion here. And thank you very much to Terry and all our invitees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Babu. Thank you very much for that presentation on Nabard's work. Do please stay till the panel discussion as well, which we will come to after all the presentations.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to now invite Mr. Devendra Dalai. He is in the Directorate of Environment in the Chandigarh administration, a Forest Service officer with a long track record of engaging on issues to do with biodiversity as well as environment management. Mr. Dalai, over to you.
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon to you all. It's my privilege now to speak on few green initiatives that the Chandigarh administration has taken, and it's a privilege for me to speak on such very important forum. and covering this important topic for discussion, that is the transforming urban resilience, participative governance, design and development. When we talk about the urban resilience, the first thing that comes to our mind is what is our preparedness to face any natural disaster or to prevent any natural disaster. So far as Chandigarh is concerned, I think we'll boast saying that Chandigarh has been taking all these green initiatives since inception, that is when the city was planned maybe 5 decades back. The greenery has always been an integral part of the urban planning here. Everybody will appreciate the fact that though the city is a small city with just 114 square kilometer area, and this greenery is very much part of the urban planning. We prepare Green Chandigarh Action Plan every year since last almost 20 years, since 2003, where we are involving all the stakeholders, and as a result of which we see now the 46% of the forest and the green cover in such a small city. I'll again emphasize on the point, the city was planned initially for just 1.5 lakh population, has now grown beyond 1 million population. In spite of those pressures also, biotic pressure, we have been able to manage 2 wildlife sanctuaries here, and recently we have declared a very famous lake of Chandigarh, that is Sukna Lake, as a wetland also for conservation point of view. Why this urban resilience is important, I think I need not be emphasizing on the point, because the recent disasters in Uttarakhand and in recent past again in Kedarnath, one more disaster was there, the flood in Chennai, flood in Kerala, super cyclone in Bhubaneswar and all coastal cities of Odisha, is a live example that why we need to wake up now in case it is we have not yet awake about all these issues. So far as participative governance is concerned, I think Chandigarh can be the best example, I'll say, so far as the participative governance is concerned. Today we had one administrators advisory council meeting where we involve all the stakeholders in important decision making. Though the administration is very proactive in listening to the people's requirement and the future planning, but we make a very formal forum for people's representative to make points for on behalf of the general public. One more good example I would like to set here, that we have collaborated with Deloitte India as a part of technical assistance under Smoothie program funded by Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, which aims at strengthening technical and management support to meet challenges faced in urban development. Our 2 phases of this project is already over. In the first phase, we worked on a non-motorized vehicle where they have done the hand-holding of the important stakeholders here. And the phase 2 was result-based monitoring and reporting of environment and climate change action was prepared. And in the third phase, it's a very important phase. Now we are into this third phase, that we are preparing a dashboard wherein we have identified 5 thematic areas, that is air quality index improvement, number 1, number 2, municipal solid waste management, number 3, clean energy use and energy efficiency, number 4 is water sanitation and water resource preservation, and number 5 is the land and natural resources conservation and preservation, covering almost like 37 indicators. I need not mention here, though the city again is a small city with just 114 square kilometer area, but we are working day and night for renewable energy, because Government of India also emphasizes a lot on marching towards the renewable sources of energy. And I take pride in submitting here that so far we have more than 70% of our energy mix is through the renewable sources. And though we have got land constraint here, in spite of that, we have the advantage that the rooftop, our urban planning and design of the building is such that the top floor of the roof is not accessible to the users. So almost all roofs are vacant, and we try to tap the solar energy, harness the solar energy for our rooftop solar energy purpose. We have a target of around 69 megawatt to be achieved by 2022, and so far we have already installed a capacity of around 40 megawatt, both on private sectors as well as the government sectors. And we have made it mandatory for all the private buildings with 500 square yard and above you have to mandatorily have to have a rooftop solar system. Besides that, I mentioned about the greenery, that is 46% greenery we have. There apart, again, we have got a 200 kilometer of cycle track here. We all encourage, you know, here the urban planning is such that we have got the neighborhood system of market here. Everything you get in the nearby sectors and all. You need not visit to the central market to meet your day-to-day requirement. We have the neighborhood market system. In spite of that also, we have got a very good network of cycle track covering both north to south and east to west of the city. Last but not the least, we are in the process, rather we have already developed, we are going to launch it in a day or two. That is one mobile application, in Android-based mobile application, where the people can register themselves on the application for their own carbon footprint. The name of the application is Carbon Watch. It is, though the other people of other cities also can have access to it, but Chandigarh people, especially this is designed for the residents of Chandigarh, they can download and they can register themselves. They can give the inputs on a regular basis so that they can know their own footprints and the measures they have to take to reduce their carbon footprints. These are the few highlights I just wanted. I'll share it with you. In case during the course of discussion anything comes to me, I'll try to answer it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dalai, for that introduction to Chandigarh's efforts. We will certainly come back to this during the discussion. I'd like to now invite Dr. Preeti Bhandari. She's the Chief of Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management Thematic Group and concurrently the Director of the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department at the Asian Development Bank. Over to you, Preeti.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. And while Swati is going to help me load my presentation, thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this event. I have the unique honor of being at the very first Sustainable Development Summit organized by Terry, and it's a pleasure to be here at the 20th anniversary of the event as well. In my presentation, what I'm trying to highlight, and we've heard, some very good examples from the speakers before me on what transformative urban resilience is about and how we can go about it. And I will intersperse it with some examples from the investments that the Asian Development Bank has been making in this area. So if we could go to the next slide. In looking at the framework on what is transformative urban resilience, I think there are three key elements related to looking at it from a systems and systemic point of view, looking at the scale that can be reached and ensuring sustainability. In terms of the systems level understanding and the understanding of underlying drivers of vulnerability in the urban areas, what we need to probably do is look at how does an urban area function in correlation to different systems, be it water systems, be it food systems, and more importantly, also social systems, and go beyond the standard short-term planning and designing that we do to a more longer-term horizon, looking at these elements which join different systems in an urban area. So looking at a systems approach and a systemic way of addressing resilience, I think is an important part of the transformation that we all, or you all as practitioners, are looking at. And over here, I'd like to give you an example from the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund, which is a multi-donor trust fund which UK is supporting. In the province of Punjab in Pakistan, what we have tried to do is help develop regional integrated urban plans and city development strategies. So it's not, looking at only one particular context, but more an integrated and a systems approach. The second point I wanted to highlight related to the scale. And in terms of scale, while a city is an important point of reference for us, but we have to look beyond the urban to higher administrative levels or to basin-wide approaches or the link to the state and the national programs. So not be, too focused and situate our interventions in the broader ecosystem that we are in, and also not forget the role of communities and households. So we did hear some excellent examples again from the city of Chandigarh. But having said that, let me give you another example, again supported by this Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund, where in the Philippines and in Indonesia, we are enabling investments to improve the resilience of the urban poor. And this we are not, the entry point for this is not the urban organization, but the national agencies which are aiming to reduce poverty in the cities, and looking at their poverty reduction programs and how climate risk and building resilience can be integrated in the poverty reduction program. So not the usual climate programs that a city may have, but looking at a national program for poverty reduction and ensuring an integration of resilience. And I know there are examples of FCDO or former DFID also working in India with the MNREGA program in this context. The third element relates to sustainability and embedding resilience considerations into our decision making and ensuring that there is inclusive urban resilience. And over here, the example provided by Dr. Rajashekar on this climate smart city assessment framework, I think comes very clearly to mind. And again, ADB is one of the 50-odd partners that is working in this initiative. And through a technical assistance, we are working in 6 cities to see how they can undertake climate risk and vulnerability assessments to build their capacity to interact with national programs, and also to identify projects which are climate resilient projects. So building capacity for climate risk assessment, but also helping enabling project development and project financing, I think is important. So the 3 points related to systems, scale, and sustainability. On how to establish it, strengthening institutional capacity and human development, of course, at the local level is critical. And again, over here, how the local government interacts with civil society, how does it bring in the academia and the think tanks is very, very relevant. It cannot be government itself. It has to be, again, in the context of the community that we are working in. And again, the Chandigarh example is a very good proof of that. And ADB has recently launched a community resilience partnership program, again with a long 10-year horizon at the recently held Climate Adaptation Summit, which is particularly looking at building the capacity of local institutions, community-based organization, to ensure that the delivery is at a strategic level and includes participatory planning and design as well. So another example from what ADB has been working on. The second point I want to make over here is the importance of pilots. And the pilots not only provide the proof of concept, but also ensure that we identify what are the enablers or enabling environment that is required to ensure that the resilience is transformative and is embedded in our thinking. And over here, I would also like to point out that the pilots do not have to be something very unique, but they have to be situated in the government policy. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to make it go up to scale. And having said that, there is again an example in Indonesia where we have launched a program on revitalization of informal settlements and their environment. And again, looking at a water sensitive approach to water supply, to sanitation, and non-network nature-based solutions like rain gardens, bioswales, and constructing wetlands. Again, an example, the support from the Climate Resilience Trust Fund. And over here, I'd like to make a pitch that some of the development partners trust funds are very, very important in doing this forward thinking, in enabling these pilots, and in ensuring that we move in the greener and more resilient space. And the learning part of it is equally important, be it through peer-to-peer exchange, or be it also involving experts. And again, through the UCCRTF, the fund, we have the Resilience Academy based on a formulation that Rockefeller Foundation came up with to enable city-level officials to learn in a peer-to-peer setting for developing projects, bringing an interdisciplinary approach and bringing expertise and experts to the conversation. And climate finance, of course, is the $100 billion question that Ambassador Ken O'Flaherty did mention in his keynote. And over here, the only pitch I'd like to make is that rather than taking a project-specific approach, if we can look at investments for improving the systems, urban systems, that would go a long way in bringing about change and transformation. Next slide, please. And this is just to highlight what ADB is doing. Resilience is a very important part of the vision of our Strategy 2030. And out of the 7 priorities in Strategy 2032, are dealing with resilience. One is, of course, making cities livable, and the second one relates to enabling climate action, building climate and disaster resilience, and environmental sustainability. So resilience is at the heart of investments that ADB would be undertaking in the coming decade. And I've already talked about the importance and relevance of the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund, which was established with support with the government of UK in 2014, and the Community Resilience Partnership Program that we have recently launched. So I would like to stop here, and I'd be happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. Thanks very much for describing a fairly extensive and deep engagement on the issues of resilience in settlements across different scales. Let's move on to our next presentation, and I'd like to now invite Ms. Aditi Garg. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Indore Smart City Development Limited.
Thank you for having me here. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. So I've heard quite a few presentations already, and being a practitioner in the field of climate change as well as building cities resilience, I think there's not much to add in terms of the theoretical aspects of the work that we have undertaken. However, I do wish to share a bit of the practice that we have recently undertaken. Indore has been fortunate in recently getting the title of being the first city to have dealt with carbon credits and successfully trading of carbon credits. So this is a good forum to share that bit of insight. Indore has, as many of you know, been in the field of cleanliness and has consistently been the cleanest city of India 4 years in a row now. And we take the business of building sustainable, clean and green cities rather seriously here. The whole point of, as the previous presenter had mentioned, of building resilient cities is to also have a resilient trust fund, or to have climate financing in a way in which it is beneficial, sustainable, and more tangible for the cities to undertake their efforts. Our venture into the arena of carbon credits has been based on that very concept. Indore city administration, the municipal corporation, and the smart city have been making consistent investments in building a clean and green Indore for very many years now. And reasonable efforts as well as amount of funds have gone into securing this effort. When we wanted to experiment with the whole arena of carbon credit, we did not really have a template to begin with because we were almost venturing into new waters. And at the same time, we also wanted to figure out if cities and city administrators can develop newer models of financing by which municipal corporations and city administrations can continue to fortify the efforts towards making investments into greenhouse reduction efforts, as well as making cities and towns greener, more sustainable. Our first idea was to register our waste and soil decomposition projects into the carbon credit cycle. We were fortunate to actually be able to venture into this field and trade the carbon credits at an international platform. There isn't a national platform actually, so we don't really we didn't really have anything to build on. And since this kind of an exchange and this kind of a platform is available only internationally, we had to go overseas and pursue our efforts. One of the things that we realized as part of our effort to finance the climate management efforts was primarily this, that carbon credits is a reasonably sustainable and dependable way in which we can build our project operation and maintenance costs. We had ventured into this area earlier as well, and having tried very many multiple platforms of exchange as well as figuring out very many ways of climate financing, we came to the conclusion that actually carbon credit is one of the most sustainable, one of the most well thought through and dependable models for a city to design climate financing around. Am I still audible? Hello?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Very much so.
Okay. So I'll just go on. When we started with this effort of building Indore as a resilient city, we were under the impression that it required city administration to make wholesome investments into projects that were long gestation period projects, and that could perhaps turn around the whole city into a more livable one, as was also mentioned by one of the previous presenters. But as we have ventured into this journey of dealing with climate change and preparing Indore for the future of a new environment of climate resilience, we have come to the conclusion that governments and administrators are not required to make wholesale investments into projects to reduce the exposure and reduce the risks. In fact, we are required to strengthen our processes and put our own house in order to deal with the challenge of climate change. And Indore has been successful to some extent in doing this. In fact, now we have become extremely optimistic, and we want to also aggressively target Indore as a carbon neutral city by 2027. So our focus and our task for the road ahead has been to ensure that the city is not just dealing with the day-to-day aspects of climate change, but is looking at a more future-oriented climate resilience. And one of the most important fillps toward our revenue has been through the carbon trading effort. Many other cities are now looking to replicate this effort of Indore, and we are also hopeful that for Indore itself, we'll be able to scale this up and bring in new projects. In fact, I'm happy to share that we are now looking to include plastic credits as part of our carbon credit mechanism. And at the same time, we are also looking at improving our water and drainage systems, which have also been incorporated as part of the climate change resilience efforts. So as a practitioner, that is what I have to share about Indore. And I'm open to any questions that anybody might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I think the Indore story continues to be one of the sort of flagship stories of smart cities in India. Let me move on to our last presenter, Dr. Manish Kumar Srivastava. Manish is, just one second. Manish is assistant professor at the Department of Energy and Environment at the Terry School of Advanced Studies. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you, Jagan. I hope you all can see my screen. It feels very nice to be part of the,
yes, we can. Manish, just go into slideshow view, please.
Yeah, I'm just doing that. It's taking a little bit of time. All right. Thank you, and I in some sense I feel as part of the, WSDS host team, so won't take much time. It has been great listening to other presentations, and I don't think I have many new things to add, but perhaps a few new terms and some interesting statistics to share. And I would summarize my presentation at the beginning, and I would call that resilience resides in networks. So if we have to think about urban resilience and transform it, we have to look at the type of networks that connect different actors, different people, differently vulnerable communities, and see what type of transformations are needed, because the key assumption in my argument is that if anybody who is not part of the network is actually vulnerable and at a higher risk. So we need to think about that. From literature, we find that the stronger the networks and greater the resilience, because a network is very helpful in pooling various types of capacities, not only just financial or technical, or but in terms of at times even the emotional capacities that are necessary for resilience, they come from networks. So and experiences that different members of the network have, they give you a lot more information and preparedness for any risk that you might face. It also gives you exposure to different experimentation, ideas, and innovation. And most importantly, a network allows you to be flexible. So if you're part of a network, if the governance is flexible and in a networked mode, then it is likely to enhance significantly your resilience. A couple of my colleagues who have worked on transnational climate governance initiatives, they find that although the question of their effectiveness is still difficult to determine, but the ones which appear to have some degree of effectiveness, they do focus a lot on participatory management, institutional capacity building, and knowledge sharing. So that holds the key. Now, what I'm sharing here is a few insights and observations that come from a project that we are undertaking in documenting the non-state and subnational action in India and Kenya, as well as part of the broader set of transnational climate governance initiatives. So as part of that, in India, we have looked at all the states, 46 cities and 46 companies. And for the cities, we find that the networks are extremely concentrated locally. They are largely driven by past experiences. So even if they have faced risks or climate events in the past, then they are more strong, the participation is greater. They are also to some extent driven by or pushed by the transnational initiatives or international agencies. A few examples as Preeti was mentioning, and that holds across, I guess, in most of the developing world. Availability of finance also is very important in maintaining the networks and their functionality. But what we also find interesting is that the actions that are being taken in cities and the nature and form of the networks between different actors at the city level, it is very much informed and guided by the higher level of government instructions. So the type of examples that Mahesh was providing, what is being done at these the central government level, or they do provide a basic framework for this cooperation and networks. But at times we also find that this could also this emphasis on telling what to do and what could be done from the top can also have a limiting role, restrictive role on what the city governments can do. And just what we heard from Chandigarh or Indore, and what we know or hear a lot about from say Surat or Ahmedabad or Kochi, it becomes clear that the more independence from cities gives them make their resilience efforts more effective. But another element that we find in terms of networks of all types of actors working together is an element of informality, that actors mobilize their capacities, their experiences in a rather informal manner more frequently than there is any formal setup or process for that. In fact, the examples of creating formal data platforms, they look at more information, but they do not seem to me engaging with the coordinating these type of informal glues that sustain networks. Just to give you a few examples of what the role of higher levels of government have in adaptation actions. So we try to map the drivers of actions at the state level. So this is broadly a review of state action plans. So we find that there are direct and indirect actions which are defined, that direct actions are mostly locally determined responses grounded in specific vulnerabilities and particular interest of the concerned actors, whereas the indirect ones are the ones those are driven or guided from top-down policy. And we find that there is on different types of vulnerabilities and risks that the distribution is fairly different. And we find that on the issues question such as water availability, which directly affects local population, there is more direct locally determined response, whereas on say biological or tropical cyclone or extreme weather related events, there is more of a top-down policy action. So there is a greater mix of what happens in terms of the authority overlaps of decision making. At the city level, it is even much more complex. So the state and central guidelines or plans that are relevant for adaptation and resilience, they inform a lot about what happens at the city level, whereas only few cities have been really very innovative and forthcoming in developing their own independent action plans, such as the heat action plans, or what we heard from Indore about the waste management initiatives. But the core point that from these two slides I want to communicate is that the overlaps between the mandates and how cities respond to that overlapping action mandate does play an important role in what types of actions are taken, and eventually add to the degree of resilience and focus of resilience as well at the city level. Now,
Manish, if I may chip in, we'll have to wind up a bit faster.
Yeah, sure. I'm almost at the end of it. So the weak spots are, one, the experiences and capacities are in silos. The information about these experiences is very scattered and in most cases inaccessible. As this is what we experienced while we were collecting the information for this for our study, and including the international agencies. They do tell us what they are doing, but how they are doing, what the experience has been that other can read up and learn is very difficult to find. And most importantly, the informality doesn't find any mention or recognition in the formal perspective or in the formal processes. Financial dependence has been already mentioned a lot. So that's where I would end based on what we experienced while collecting information and looking at what different actors are doing on adaptation, is that the important thing is to build formal networks of localized capacities and informal networks. I would be very skeptical of any upscaling efforts because resilience has to be locally grounded. Second is important thing is to record what is being done, what have been the experiences, build database of people and organizations and what capacities and resources they brought in while creating those experiences, and encourage through formal mechanisms the participation of private sector and academic and research institutions to work with city level networks on resilience. And finally, and most important, I think, would be, but could perhaps be politically a little bit more challenging, autonomy and power to cities so that they can sustain local networks themselves and don't have to depend on too much on external sources. So these are some of the scattered thoughts that I have on the topic of this thematic session. Thank you.
Thanks, Manish. Not scattered at all. In fact, very structured. Thanks very much for, in fact, ending on a point which can give us a point of departure for our discussion. And I'd like to address a few questions to our speakers. We don't have a lot of time, so please do respond with very crisp answers if you can. In fact, the point that Manish ends on with regard to the needs of finance, I'd like to recall what Ms. Aditi Garg pointed out, which was that you can meet a lot of the costs of this from your own house, so to speak. She says if you get your house in order, just using the resources and using the processes which are available at city level could actually help you to manage your ambitions with regard to building resilience. And of course, carbon credits seems to be one of the ways in which she said operations and maintenance costs can be easily covered with capital expenditure from normal budgetary allocations. Let me, unfortunately, we will start with a question to Mahesh. Mahesh, can I just ask you to very briefly tell us about in terms of the importance of networks at the local level? How do you view those playing into this trajectory that you described of going is the role of our subnational actors, such as institutions like NIUA and others, in helping people make that?
Thank you, Professor Jagan, for that. And the action happens on the ground with the help of communities or the spaces, even public spaces which gets developed, or even community spaces which get developed. Ultimately, it comes down to communities for an extended period of time. When you talk about green infrastructure, when you talk about sustainability, it is the ownership taken by the local community or the local what we see is the partnership should be at various tiers. You know, the national, of course, key policies and standard operating procedures can be provided, but of course, day-to-day instructions and management cannot be provided by them. Every city in the country responds to the state, because city actors have a much larger role to play than the national actors when it comes to doing things with respect to building bylaws, planning guidelines, ensuring that the planning guidelines are followed, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, it is the ULB which provides the services, and ULB which caters to, you know, aspects such as revenue, aspects such as basic service delivery, and also health and sanitation, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to operationalizing things around water, around sanitation, around waste management, of course, it is the ULB level associations which need to play a very critical role. But like I said, it is the communities which actually implement. If not, they don't implement, at least the ownership of the infrastructure comes down to the communities and corporate level, ward level agencies and ward level associations, RAVAs, including RAVAs, which play a key role. So what we see is it has to be at all tiers. So apart from having these 50 institutions, which we have, I mentioned in my presentation, there is going to be a group of 1,000+ champions who are going to be working with the cities, who are going to be trained, whose capacity is going to be built, and they are the people who are going to drive actions within the cities. And that's what we hope is going to create the transformation. And these institutions are just catalysts. They are providing platform, they are providing some few resources, they are augmenting the resources which exist, but ultimately it is going to be the warriors are going to be at the ground level, and the champions are also going to be at the ground level. Thank you.
Thanks, Mahesh. Thanks very much. I'd like to move to Dr. Babu. Dr. Babu, you talked about building capacities in tribal communities and actually helping them, in a sense, make a transition to resilience. Help us understand this kind of conundrum, you know, because the tribal communities have actually been there for thousands of years. So clearly quite resilient and sustainable. But in the urbanization narrative, what we are seeing is a lot of migration from the areas where they lived, very often forest areas, to city areas. How do you see the shift, and can the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund actually help in targeting support to tribal communities that are moving into urban areas?
Yeah, it's a very important question actually. From point of view of our working, Nabard's working, basically, we know that our India's population around 10% is a tribal population, and our experience actually has been with relation to the actually when we implemented a sustainable livelihood development project for the tribals in Gujarat. And we took a learning, actually. It is something like that. These communities, they live on fringes, they have a small land holding, their vulnerability is very extreme, and particularly to climate adaptability. So when we took exercise from our Gujarat learning, we thought of actually why not we try to create pilot across all states where the tribal population is concentrated. Basically, the issue what Professor Jagan you are indicating, basically beside the vulnerability, we were also having this idea in mind how these people migrate actually in difficult time, and how to arrest this thing. So our approach was how to create the integrated livelihood development programs. This program was basically, we called it a body approach of development. Basically, is developing a small orchard to the community, to the landowners, wherein they go for the horti plantation, fruit plantation. Besides that, we give them the basically how to for the sustainable part of this thing, small business they can start. They can go for the small activities, livelihood activity, income generating activities, just like goatries, piggeries, or poultries, any small activities, and they remain there. They do not move actually. So after the 5 years, we have actually we studied their income level part, how the adaptive capacity of this community have improved, their income level have improved, their migration has checked. They remain there. They have started doing some kind of small activities for their sustainable. So it is a basically holistic approach. So far across India, we have reached to 50 lakh of 50 lakh, yeah, of course, 0.5 million actually, 0.5 million tribal families. So 50 lakh tribals actually we call it. So this is our own funding arrangement, our basically grant arrangement. So we provide them small grant through community service organizations, NGOs working, reputed NGOs are working in India through them. And a very strong actually monitoring mechanism which has been put in place, whether plants are surviving, whether families remains there, whether their income level is improving, whether they are linked to the, now we are trying to link to the farmers producers organization so that their produce also reaches to the market, and that is how the sustainability part of these tribal families we are trying to actually ensure. That is
Thank you.
The model actually, right? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Babu. Thank you for that response. We have very few minutes left, so I'm going to very quickly address one question to Mr. Dalai. Mr. Dalai, you also have been leading this initiative on the Chandigarh Renewable Energy Science and Tech Promotion Society, which is another very outstanding example of how at the sub-city level itself, you can bring communities of researchers and R&D institutions together. Could you very briefly tell us, can you use an organization like CREST to address one of Chandigarh's very pressing needs, which is that it is becoming water scarce? Is that something that you are planning to do? And what are your thoughts about this?
See, the main mandate of this CREST, as you know, is basically, though it is the Science and Technology Promotion Society, mostly we focus on the renewable energy sources. And as you know that Chandigarh has already become more than 70% so far the renewable energy is concerned in the energy mix, both hydroelectric as well as the solar energy is concerned. But CREST is mainly mandated for harnessing the solar energy, that is the rooftop solar energy. Since we have the scarcity of the land here, that we are mostly harnessing the solar energy. And so far the water scarcity is concerned, I think Chandigarh still it is dependent on the Vakranangal project that we are taking water from them, and we are trying to make it a 24 hours water supply so that the pressure on the resources also gets reduced over time. Of course, it is not directly dealt by the CREST, but it is dealt by the municipal corporation who is very aggressively working on it.
Okay, thank you very much. I stand corrected, but I think essentially a local network of institutions, like Manish was pointing out, could actually address various questions like renewable energy demand as well as water and so on. And perhaps if you've been able to mobilize those kinds of networks at the local level.
Yeah, see, in Chandigarh administration, we have a very small administration. So interdepartmental coordination is very high, very nice here. So we don't have much compartmental thinking kind of administration. So almost on a daily basis, we meet together and we deliberate on many common issues and we try to sort it out. And so far as the stakeholders' participation is concerned, is also we are very open to the ideas of the various stakeholders, including the public and other non-government organizations also. So I don't think it will be a barrier for me even to take up this matter with any other department, be it Smart City Limited or maybe be it Municipal Corporation of Chandigarh. We can very well take it up.
Thank you very much. Swati, do we have 5 minutes or less?
We just have 3 minutes left to wind up the session, Mr. Shah.
I see. Okay. in that case, if you allow me, and with apologies to Preeti and Manish, because I won't be able to bring you in with a question on this, but I do want to in fact start my summarizing of the session with some of the points that Preeti made in her presentation. I think what we see across a lot of the presentations, either overtly or implicit in the presentation, is the role of systems and networks. And Preeti pointed out that we have to take a systems view to resilience in urban areas, and it is through systems that multiple actors really get integrated into the effort of an urban area and urban local body. So that's really crucial. And the scale issue is really important as well, as Preeti pointed out. Manish might differ with what Preeti said, because I think Manish basically said that you can't really look at scaling from that local network to other cities. I hope, Manish, I didn't get you wrong, but it is a challenge. The Smart Cities mission, for instance, does want to achieve scale in 100 cities as lighthouses for what India currently has is more than 4,000 cities. So this is continuing to be a challenge for the urbanization and resilience story in India, but really important to point out that this integrated planning that Preeti pointed out at the local level, the resilience of the urban poor who are most affected by a lot of the climate hazards and climate action, is integrated with systems and is something that at least has set its sights on achieving scale. I think across our presentations, we got a very granular idea of how practitioners such as Ms. Garg, Dr. Babu, and Mr. Dalai are addressing these challenges at the level of their own mandates in their organizations, in the cities and the areas where they work. And very enlightening presentations by the three, what you might call practitioners, but importantly also the research and the innovation actors in this overall ecosystem, such as Mahesh and Preeti and Manish, who have, I think, together reinforced the idea that you can actually use donor funds, you can use external support, you can use networks to build local capacity for integrated responses, which can build resilience at the local level. So I think we covered a lot of ground in this session. Unfortunately, we are exactly at 5 p.m. and I think Swati is definitely going to disconnect our session if we don't stop now. But I want to thank all of our presenters and thank you very much for participating. Extremely sorry because we started a little late, that things were a little disrupted, but this was truly enjoyable. Thank you very much. And over to you, Swati.
Thank you so much to all our speakers for an insightful discussion. And I'd also like to thank our audience who've participated actively and probed further with their questions. And last but not the least, I would like to thank our colleagues from the British High Commission for their continued support and patronage. Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Best wishes.